My brother's fiancée didn't even flinch when she said it to me. "You're too poor for our engagement party. Stay home." Her words hit like a slap, and the worst part was the casual smirk that followed, like she knew she could put me in my place with just one sentence. I stood there with the phone pressed to my ear, hearing my own heartbeat drown out the rest of her polished voice as she explained, almost sweetly, that their celebration was going to be elegant, and that people like me, with my thrift store clothes and my waitress salary, would only embarrass them in front of her family. And the thing that cut deeper than anything was the silence from my brother in the background. He was there, I could hear him, but he didn't step in, didn't defend me, didn't say my name. That silence told me everything. He agreed. It wasn't just her looking down on me. It was him too. But let me back up, because this didn't start with an engagement party. My brother Adam was always the golden child. Growing up, he got the new sneakers while I got the hand-me-downs. He got driving lessons at 16 while I took the bus until I was 21. He got his college tuition paid in full while I was told to be realistic and figure out community college myself. I learned early that in my family, Adam's dreams were investments, and mine were liabilities. I swallowed it for years, thinking maybe one day things would balance out, but they never did. And then he met her, Lily. The girl with perfect curls, expensive handbags, and a voice that could switch from syrupy sweet to venomous in seconds. From the moment she walked into our house for the first time, I felt it. The way she scanned, me up and down, lingering on my shoes, my hair, the tiny chip on my nail polish. She didn't see me as Adam's sister. She saw me as competition she didn't even have to try to beat. And Adam? He was blind to it, or maybe he chose to be. He basked in her glow, desperate to prove he could keep up with her wealthy family. Every holiday after that turned into a performance. She'd arrive in her luxury car, bring overpriced wine, and talk about vacations in Europe while I sat there with stories from the cafe where I worked double shifts just to keep rent paid. My parents played along too, fawning over her like she was royalty, while I faded into the wallpaper. So when Lily called me about the party, her cruelty didn't come out of nowhere. It was the final sharpened blade after years of quiet cuts. Still, hearing her say it out loud, that I wasn't welcome because of money, lit a fire in me I hadn't felt in years. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I let her hang up, and then I sat on my sagging couch in my tiny apartment, staring at the cracked paint on the wall, and I promised myself something. If they wanted to write me off as nothing, I was going to show them exactly how wrong they were. And the best part? They had no idea that I already had a card up my sleeve, one that would turn their perfect little engagement night into the beginning of their downfall. I didn't sleep that night after Lily's call. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying her words over and over. "You're too poor. Stay home." It wasn't just an insult. It was an erasure. She wanted to erase me from my own brother's life, from his big moment, from the family narrative. They were writing together where she was the glamorous savior who elevated him above his roots. But I knew better. Adam didn't grow up wealthy. He grew up in the same cramped house I did, eating ramen when our parents were behind on bills, wearing secondhand uniforms for school because new ones weren't in the budget. The difference between us was that Adam never had to feel the sting of rejection the way I did. He was shielded, coddled, always given the benefit of the doubt. And me? I was the one who got the lectures about being practical, about not aiming too high, about not embarrassing the family. Adam got dreams. I got warnings. And Lily? She had the money, the looks, the social power. But she didn't have history. She didn't know the years of sacrifices, the nights I skipped dinner so Adam could have seconds, the way I worked through high school to help cover bills while he studied in peace. She didn't know that without me, Adam wouldn't have been free to be the golden boy. And the bitter truth was, Adam never acknowledged it either. So when Lily told me I wasn't invited, it wasn't just her cruelty, it was Adam's betrayal. Because silence in that moment meant agreement. He let her humiliate me, and that was something I would never forget. The next morning, I dragged myself into the cafe where I worked, putting on the fake smile I reserved for customers. But inside, the rage was boiling. Every clink of a coffee cup, Every order of an overpriced latte, every tip that barely covered my bus fare. It all reminded me of the gap they believed defined me. But what they didn't know was that I wasn't as powerless as I looked. A month earlier, I'd stumbled across something. Adam had asked me, in his usual entitled way, to look over some paperwork while he was out of town. He said he trusted me because you're good with details, but really it was because he didn't want to pay a lawyer to do it. Buried in those documents, I found contracts, business deals with Lily's family, signatures that didn't look right, financial transfers that smelled like fraud. I didn't say anything at the time. I tucked the copies away, not even sure why. Maybe just an instinct that someday I might need them. And now, hearing her dismiss me like garbage, I knew exactly what that instinct was for. Revenge doesn't come from shouting or crying or begging for inclusion. It comes from waiting, watching, and striking when no one expects you. They thought I was too poor to matter, too invisible to notice. But I had noticed everything, and I was going to use it. I pictured Lily's perfect engagement night, the glittering chandeliers, the champagne toasts, the speeches about love and family. I pictured her standing there in her designer gown, smug, glowing, sure that she had won. And then I pictured what would happen when certain truths started leaking out. What would happen when whispers of forged signatures and questionable money began to circulate in the same room she tried to keep me out of? That thought alone kept me going, pouring coffee after coffee, smiling at strangers while planning how to shatter my brother's perfect little world. Because here's what they never understood. You can strip someone of dignity, of invitations, of respect. But once you've pushed them far enough, the thing they come back with isn't desperation. It's fire. And mine was only getting started. The week of the engagement party crawled by like slow poison. My phone buzzed with family group messages, pictures of decorations, chatter about the menu, excited notes about how beautiful Lily's dress would be. My name wasn't mentioned once, not even a question about whether I was coming. They'd all silently accepted my absence, as if it was natural, as if I didn't exist. That silence burned worse than Lily's insult. I wasn't just excluded, I was erased. At night, in my tiny apartment with the peeling linoleum floors, I sat cross-legged on the bed and went through the papers I had copied from Adam's file. My fingers traced the lines of signatures, the mismatched ink, the odd dates. It was all there. Fake loan documents under Lily's father's name, a shell company connected to Adam's account, money flowing back and forth in numbers that didn't add up. They thought it was hidden in plain sight because no one ever thought I mattered enough to notice. That was their biggest mistake. I didn't just notice. I understood. And I started to piece together a plan. I wasn't going to scream in their faces or beg them to let me into their shiny little world. I was going to wait until their world collapsed around them, and then I would walk through the ashes without saying a word. But before any of that, I had to face something harder. My own mother. 2 nights before the party, she called me. Her voice was full of that same clipped politeness she always used with me, the kind that made everything sound like an order, never a choice. "Sweetheart," she said, "we're going to have a very elegant evening. It's going to mean so much for Adam's future. You understand, don't you?" I didn't say anything. She filled the silence like she always did. "Lily's family will be there. Important people, business connections. It's not really your kind of event. I think it's better if you sit this one out. You'll understand one day." And just like that, the door slammed shut. Not only was Lily calling me too poor, but my own mother was validating it, dressing the insult up as for the greater good. I bit my lip so hard it almost bled, but I stayed quiet, because I knew that arguing would get me nowhere. In this family, money and image always won. They'd built their loyalty around Adam's shine, and I was just a shadow. But shadows see things that light can't. After that call, my decision was final. I wasn't going to crash their party and beg for scraps of dignity. No. I was going to let them celebrate. I was going to let them drink and dance and raise their glasses to a future built on lies. And then, when the timing was right, I was going to pull the thread that unraveled it all. In the days leading up, I reached out quietly to someone Adam had long forgotten. His ex-girlfriend, Rachel. Years ago, she had loved him, supported him, even loaned him money when he was struggling. He dumped her as soon as Lily appeared with her luxury handbags and wealthy connections. Rachel had every reason to hate him, and when I showed her what I'd found in those documents, her eyes widened in recognition. She'd seen some of those names before. She knew things. Suddenly, I wasn't alone. We met late at night in a quiet diner, sharing fries while she pulled up old emails, messages, receipts. Piece by piece, we built a picture of Adam and Lily's empire of lies. And it wasn't just shady. It was criminal, fraud, forgery. If this ever saw daylight, they wouldn't just lose face. They could lose everything. That knowledge sat in my chest like a glowing ember. I wasn't ready to throw it into the fire yet. I wanted the timing perfect. And the engagement party, the night they planned to crown themselves king and queen of our family's future, that was going to be the spark. The day of the engagement party arrived, and the city felt heavier than usual, like even the sky was holding its breath. I woke up early, not because I was invited or because I had something to wear, but because I needed to prepare. My phone buzzed with pictures from the family group chat, tables covered with white linens, crystal glasses lined up in rows, chandeliers sparkling above. Someone had written, "It's going to be magical tonight." Magical for them, maybe. For me, it was war. I dressed simply, jeans and a black sweater, blending into the background of the world. While they prepared their speeches and posed for photos, I packed a small folder into my bag, the one with the copies of contracts, signatures, bank transfers. I didn't need a ball gown to make an entrance. My power wasn't in sequins or heels. It was in ink and evidence. At 6 o'clock sharp, the party began. The venue was a rented ballroom downtown, the kind of place I'd only ever seen in movies. Gold-framed mirrors lined the walls, violins played softly in the corner, and champagne flowed like water. I didn't walk in with the crowd. I waited, standing across the street in the shadows, watching them file in. My brother was laughing, shaking hands, kissing Lily's cheek like she was a crown jewel. She wore a dress that shimmered under the lights, her hand adorned with a massive diamond ring that glittered every time she raised her glass. They looked perfect, untouchable. But I knew the truth, and that truth was a weapon. I slipped inside, an hour later, unnoticed, while the party buzzed at its peak. No one looked twice at me, not with all the glitter and noise distracting them. I stood near the back, close enough to hear the speeches. My mother took the stage first, her voice breaking as she praised Lily for elevating our family, for helping Adam step into the man he was meant to be. Every word was a knife twisting deeper, but I stayed calm, my hands gripping the strap of my bag. Adam followed, his smile wide, his tone rehearsed. "Family means everything," he said, his eyes sweeping the room, never once meeting mine. "And tonight I'm proud to begin a new chapter." I almost laughed. Family meant everything? He hadn't even defended his own sister when his fiancée called her trash. He hadn't lifted a finger when our mother told me to stay home. But he could stand up there, glass raised high, pretending loyalty was his strength. The hypocrisy was almost poetic. That was when I saw Lily's father, seated at the front, clapping proudly. The same man whose forged signature I had in my bag. The same man whose wealth was being siphoned and manipulated in ways he hadn't even realized. And suddenly, I knew the moment had come. I didn't storm the stage. I didn't shout. Instead, I waited until the room quieted, until the speeches were done, until people mingled with champagne flutes in hand. Then I walked calmly to one of the waiters, slipped an envelope into his hand, and nodded toward Lily's father. "Deliver this to him," I whispered. The waiter didn't question me. He carried the envelope across the glittering floor, weaving between gowns and tuxedos, until he placed it into the man's lap. I watched from the corner as he frowned, sliding open the paper. Inside were copies of the contracts, the mismatched signatures, the trail of transactions. His eyes moved quickly, confusion turning to suspicion, suspicion to anger. He looked up at Adam, then at Lily, then back at the papers. The room still buzzed with laughter, but I could see the storm brewing in his face. He stood abruptly, cutting through the music with the scrape of his chair. "Adam," he said loudly enough for those nearby to hear, "we need to talk." And just like that, the perfect night began to crack. I didn't need to announce myself. I didn't need to shout. All I had to do was place the right truth in the right hands and let it explode from within. The ballroom grew tense as Lily's father held the papers in his trembling hand. His voice had been sharp, but now his silence was even sharper. People nearby started to notice. Whispers floated between tables. Glances darted toward Adam, who stood frozen with a glass of champagne half raised. Lily noticed too. Her smile faltered, just for a second, before she masked it again with that same polished charm. She leaned toward her father, trying to whisper something, but he held up a hand to silence her. That was when the music stopped. The violinist, sensing the shift in energy, lowered his bow. The chatter dulled. A strange, prickling hush settled over the room, the kind of silence that feels like the moment before lightning strikes. "Adam," Lily's father said again, his tone heavy with suspicion. "Come with me. Now." He marched toward the side door of the ballroom, the papers still in his grip. Adam followed, his smile plastered awkwardly on his face, his hand twitching nervously against his suit pocket. Lily trailed behind, her heels clicking like gunshots against the marble floor. The guests exchanged confused looks, and my mother, seated at the front, forced a brittle laugh. "Everything's fine," she announced too loudly. "Just business. Talk." But even she knew it was a lie, because in families like Lily's, business was the only thing that mattered. I stayed where I was, unnoticed in the crowd, watching them vanish through the side door. My chest tightened with both satisfaction and fear. I hadn't planned what came next. I just knew that once the truth touched her father's hands, nothing would be the same. Minutes passed. Guests shifted uncomfortably, sipping their drinks, whispering behind manicured hands. And then the door opened again. Lily's father stormed back in, his face flushed with rage. Adam followed, his smile gone, sweat glistening on his temple. Lily was pale now, her perfect glow stripped away. "This," her father thundered, waving the papers, "is fraud. Do you take me for a fool? My name forged? My accounts tampered. With? You thought you could drag my family into this filth?" The room gasped as if the chandeliers themselves had shattered. My mother shot up from her seat, stumbling forward. "There must be some mistake," she stammered. "Adam would never," but her voice cracked, betraying her disbelief. Lily's mask finally broke. "Dad, please," she said, reaching for his arm. "It's not what it looks like." He wrenched his arm away. "Not what it looks like? Do you think I can't read numbers? Do you think I don't recognize when my own daughter is covering?" "For a liar?" His voice thundered across the ballroom. Adam tried to step in. "It's not what you think, sir. I can explain." But the man cut him off with a roar. "Explain it to the police." That was the moment the chaos truly began. Guests surged to their feet, phones appeared in hands, whispers turned into frantic chatter. The illusion of glamour shattered like glass. Lily stood frozen, her face drained of color, while Adam's shoulders sagged as though the weight of his secrets had finally crushed him. And me? I slipped quietly toward the exit, my heart pounding but my steps steady. I didn't need to see the rest to know what would follow. Angry confrontations, deals falling apart, reputations burning under the scrutiny of scandal. I had done what I came to do. They had tried to erase me from the story, but now I was the ghost in every corner of their downfall, the silent witness who pulled the first thread. And as I pushed open the ballroom doors, stepping into the cool night air, I whispered to myself, poor doesn't mean powerless. And tonight, they finally learned that. I didn't rush home that night. I wanted to feel the city around me, the way the air seemed different now that the truth was loose. I walked with my bag against my side, blending into the crowds while, across town, Adam and Lily's perfect facade collapsed in front of everyone they had tried so hard to impress. Later, I learned what happened after I left. A guest filmed the entire confrontation, posting it online within an hour. The clips spread like wildfire, Lily's father shouting about fraud, Adam stammering, Lily crying, By midnight, it had reached people Adam worked with, and by morning, the video was all over social media. No one cared about their sparkling engagement anymore. They cared about the scandal. Adam tried to call me the next day. His name lit up my phone, but I let it ring until it stopped. He texted instead. "We need to talk. Please. This isn't what you think." I stared at the screen. The same way I had stared at the peeling paint on my wall after Lily told me to stay home, except this time I felt no sting, no humiliation, just clarity. I deleted the text without replying, because I knew what he wanted, for me to save him. I had been saving him my whole life, covering for his mistakes, giving him my share, staying silent when he got what I never did. But not anymore. I owed him nothing. Still, the fallout wasn't as simple as ignoring his calls. My mother showed up at my apartment 2 days later, unannounced. She didn't knock gently. She pounded on the door until I opened it. Her face was drawn, her lipstick smudged, her voice trembling with anger. "What did you do?" she demanded. "Do you realize what you've done to this family? To your brother?" I held her stare, feeling a strange calm wash over me. "What I did," I said slowly, "was tell the truth, something none of you ever wanted to hear." She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes, but not the kind of tears that came from sadness. They were tears of shame, shame that the golden image of her son had cracked, shame that her carefully curated family story had collapsed. But not shame for me, never for me. "You've ruined him," she whispered. "You've ruined all of us." I almost laughed. For years I had been told I was nothing, invisible, poor, unworthy. And now she was standing in my doorway, trembling, because I had finally shown how much power I really had. "I didn't ruin him," I said coldly. "He ruined himself. All I did was stop covering it up." She tried to argue, her voice rising and falling, but I didn't give her the satisfaction of more words. I closed the door in her face, slowly, deliberately, until her pleas were muffled by the wood. And when the lock clicked, I leaned against it, breathing deep. For the first time in years, the air felt light. The weeks that followed were chaos for Adam and Lily. Her father cut off all financial support, her family's business reputation took a hit, and Adam's employer placed him on leave pending internal investigation. Lawyers got involved. There were whispers of charges, though I didn't know how far it would go. Rachel, the ex he had tossed aside, fed information to the right people, and she made sure I saw every update. We weren't friends, not really. But we were allies now, bound together by what Adam had taken from both of us. Sometimes late at night, I replayed the moment Lily told me I was too poor for their party. The venom in her voice. The silence of my brother in the background. And I smiled. Because they wanted me erased. And instead, I became the shadow that destroyed their perfect world. It didn't take long before the police got involved. Fraud leaves a trail, and the documents I had slipped to Lily's father were only the beginning. Within a week, Adam was summoned for questioning, and Lily's father made it clear to the investigators that he wanted nothing swept under the rug. For him, it wasn't just about the forged contracts. It was about betrayal. His own future. Son-in-law had used his name and resources like disposable props, and in his world, reputation was worth more than money. That meant Adam was finished before he even stepped foot into the station. Word traveled fast in our community. People who had once praised Adam for his bright future now whispered about him in grocery store aisles, shared articles on Facebook, and replayed the viral video with captions like "Golden Boy Caught Lying." My mother stopped answering her phone when old friends called. She couldn't bear the humiliation. She showed up at my apartment again once, but this time she didn't yell. She just sat there on my couch, small and defeated, her eyes rimmed, red. "He could go to jail," she whispered, her hands twisting in her lap. "He's your brother. Don't you care?" I stared at her, feeling the weight of all the years I had carried him on my back. "He didn't care when his fiancée told me I wasn't good enough to be in the same room as them," I said quietly. "He didn't care when you told me to sit out so he could shine. Why should I care now?" She flinched, like my words struck deeper than she expected. But I didn't soften. I had spent my whole life softening, giving, excusing. That part of me was gone. Meanwhile, Adam tried harder to reach me. Calls, texts, even emails. He begged, pleaded, said he needed me, said only I could explain to the police that it was all just a misunderstanding. But I let every message sit unanswered. The irony wasn't lost on me. The brother who let me be erased now wanted me to save him from disappearing altogether. And Lily? She unraveled in public. The glamorous fiancée who once pranced through every gathering like she was untouchable was suddenly showing up at family events alone, her makeup smeared, her smile brittle. People whispered about how her father had cut her off, how she had moved back into her parents' house, how she had been heard screaming at Adam in the courthouse parking lot. Their perfect romance had crumbled faster than it was built. I knew, because Rachel sent me a video. Lily throwing her engagement ring at Adam's chest while shouting, "You used me! You ruined everything!" Watching that clip late at night, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and pity. Not for Lily, she had played her part in trying to break me, but pity for the hollow, empty way Adam looked as the ring bounced off him and clattered onto the asphalt. The man who once had everything handed to him was standing there with nothing left but shame. Still, he didn't give up trying to pull me down with him. He cornered me outside the cafe one morning, his suit wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. "Why?" he demanded, his voice hoarse. "Why would you do this to me? To us?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time I saw the boy I had once protected, the boy I skipped meals for, the boy I thought was worth sacrificing myself for. But that boy was gone. In his place was a man who had taken and taken until there was nothing left to give. "I didn't do this to you," I said evenly. "You did this to yourself. All I did was stop cleaning up the mess." His jaw tightened, his fists clenched at his sides, but he had no words left. He turned and walked away, shoulders slumped, and I knew something in him had finally broken. For me, it wasn't triumph. It was justice. And justice, after years of silence, felt heavier than revenge. Weeks passed, and Adam's world continued to cave in. The investigation turned public when a local journalist picked up the story. Promising young executive accused of fraud. His picture was plastered online, his name tied forever to the scandal. Friends who once admired him stopped answering his calls. Old mentors distanced themselves. Even our father, who had always boasted about Adam's achievements, couldn't look people in the eye at church anymore. My mother barely left the house. I heard from distant relatives that she blamed me, told anyone who would listen that I had betrayed my own blood. But the truth was, blood had betrayed me long before. The only one who reached out with honesty was Rachel. She called one evening, her voice steady but carrying years of bitterness. "You know," she said, "for years I thought I was the fool for trusting him. But watching all this, I realized he was the fool for underestimating the people he hurt." Her words stuck with me, because that was the thread running through all of it. Adam and Lily believed they could trample people without consequences. They believed loyalty was a one-way street, with them always on the receiving end. But loyalty isn't blindness. It isn't silence. And mine had expired. Meanwhile, Lily's life spiraled in a different way. With her father cutting her off, financially, she tried desperately to hold on to the status she had flaunted. I saw pictures online of her selling designer handbags, downsizing her apartment, clinging to friends who were already slipping away. The woman who once told me I was too poor to be seen at her engagement party was suddenly living a reality she had mocked me for. And it wasn't me who humiliated her. It was her own arrogance, her blindness to the fragility of the world she stood on. Then came the hearing. Adam was called into court, facing charges that carried the possibility of jail time. I sat in the back row, not to gloat, but to witness. I watched as he walked in wearing a borrowed suit, his shoulders hunched, his once confident stride reduced to a shuffle. He glanced at the benches, his eyes scanning until they landed on me. For a moment, our gazes locked. I saw a plea there, silent, desperate. But I didn't nod. I didn't smile. I simply stared back, calm, unflinching, reminding him with my silence that I no longer carried his weight. The judge reviewed the documents, the testimonies, the evidence. Words like forgery, fraudulent intent, breach of trust echoed through the courtroom. Every phrase tightened the rope around Adam's future. Lily wasn't there to support him. She had vanished from his side completely. By the end of the day, he was left facing probation, fines that would bury him in debt for years, and a ruined name that no amount of charm could rebuild. When court adjourned, he tried once more. He shuffled over to me, his voice a whisper. "Please, you're all I have left." For years, those words would have broken me. For years, I would have stepped in, given what little I had to make sure he stayed afloat. But not anymore. I stood, slung my bag over my shoulder, and said, the words I had been waiting my entire life to say, "Then you have nothing." I walked out before he could answer, my heels clicking against the marble floor, each step echoing like a door slamming shut. After the court hearing, the silence from my family was louder than any words. Days went by without a single call, no messages, no group chats buzzing with updates. It was as if I had been erased entirely, but this time, I welcomed it. For the first time in my life, their silence wasn't a punishment. It was freedom. I poured myself into work at the cafe, not because I needed distraction, but because I wanted to feel grounded again, to rebuild a life that wasn't defined by Adam's shadow. Still, the ripples of what had happened followed me everywhere. Customers whispered when they recognized my last name. Neighbors glanced at me with a mix of curiosity and caution, like I was carrying some dangerous secret. But I didn't hide. I walked taller than I ever had, knowing I had faced the storm and come out stronger. Meanwhile, Adam's descent didn't stop with the court ruling. He lost his job officially, his reputation in tatters. Word spread that he was struggling to find even basic work. No one wanted to be associated with someone tainted by fraud. He moved back into my parents' house, a 30-year-old man sleeping in his childhood bedroom, stripped of every illusion he once clung to. My mother still defended him to anyone who would listen, painting him as a victim of circumstance, but the more she tried, the more isolated she became. Even her friends started to distance themselves, tired of her excuses. As for Lily, her engagement to Adam was over, broken off in a storm of screaming matches and public embarrassment. The diamond ring she once flaunted disappeared, rumored to have been sold to cover debts. She avoided public events, hiding from the very society she used to dominate. The girl who sneered at my thrift store clothes was now whispered about as the fallen queen. Her reign ended before it had even begun. I thought I would feel triumphant watching them both fall, but what I felt was something quieter, deeper. Relief. I no longer had to prove myself to them, no longer had to beg for a place at their table. I had built my own table in my small apartment with my own hard-earned money, with people who respected me not for what I wore or what I earned, but for who I was. One night, weeks after the dust had settled, Adam showed up at my door. He looked thinner, older, the weight of disgrace etched into his face. For the first time in my life, I saw him not as the golden child, but as a man broken by his own choices. He stood there in silence for a long moment before finally saying, "I'm sorry." The words were small, almost fragile, and I knew they cost him everything to say. But I also knew it was too late. Sorry couldn't undo the years he let me carry the burden alone. Sorry couldn't erase the silence when Lily told me I was too poor to be part of his life. Sorry couldn't rebuild the trust he had chosen to burn. "I hope you mean that," I told him, my voice steady. "But it doesn't. Change anything. I closed the door gently, not in anger, but in finality. And when the lock clicked, I felt the last chain break. I wasn't his safety net anymore. I wasn't the family's shadow. I was free. Months passed, and life slowly rearranged itself into something unrecognizable from the chaos of that night. The scandal faded from the headlines, replaced by fresher gossip, but the stain on Adam's name never lifted. He lived like a ghost in our hometown, moving from one odd job to another, too proud to admit how far he'd fallen, but too broken to rebuild anything meaningful. I saw him once across the street, head down, carrying grocery bags with coupons, clipped to the handles. For a moment, I almost felt that old instinct, the urge to help, to soften, to protect. But then I remembered the sound of Lily's voice, sharp and cruel, telling me I was too poor to sit in the same room as them, and his silence on the other end of the line. That silence had taught me everything I needed to know. Lily, on the other hand, tried to reinvent herself. She reappeared online with a new image, less luxury, more humble lifestyle blogger, posting pictures of homemade meals and secondhand fashion as though she had chosen simplicity instead of being forced into it. But people weren't fooled. Comments flooded her posts with reminders of who she had been, of the scandal she had tied herself to. Her fall from grace wasn't dramatic anymore. It was quiet, lingering, the kind of fall that strips a person, layer by layer, until they're left with nothing but the memory of who they pretended to be. My mother never forgave me. She still saw Adam as her golden boy, even tarnished, even ruined, and me as the traitor who had brought him down. But by then, her opinion no longer mattered. I had spent too many years fighting for her approval, twisting myself into knots trying to be seen. Now I understood that some people will never see you, not because you're invisible, but because they refuse to look. And that refusal is their burden, not yours. What mattered was that I saw myself clearly for the first time. I wasn't poor. I wasn't lesser. I wasn't disposable. I was the one who had endured, who had noticed the details everyone else ignored, who had finally drawn a line and refused to let it be crossed again. One evening, I sat in my apartment, the same peeling paint on the walls, the same secondhand furniture, but everything felt different. The silence was no longer heavy, it was peaceful. I brewed a cup of tea, opened the window to let in the cool night air, and allowed myself a small smile. Because in the end, revenge wasn't about destroying Adam or Lily. It wasn't about the viral video, the courtroom, or the downfall. It was about reclaiming the power they tried to strip away from me. It was about proving, if only to myself, that their words didn't define me. I defined me. And as I looked out at the city lights blinking in the distance, I whispered the truth. I had carried like a secret weapon all along. Being poor never made me powerless. And walking away was the richest thing I ever did. Looking back now, I realized the real revenge wasn't in the documents, or in watching Adam and Lily's world collapse. It was in the simple act of refusing to play the role they had written for me. For years, I had been the shadow, silent, small, overlooked. They thought I would always stay that way, easy to ignore, easy to erase. But the moment I chose myself, the moment I stopped carrying their weight, everything shifted. Their empire of lies crumbled, and I walked out untouched. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I didn't beg. I simply turned the key, closed the door, and left them with the ruins they had built for themselves. And in that quiet, I finally found my voice. Family, I learned, isn't about blood, it's about respect. And when respect dies, family is. Nothing but a chain you're free to break, so I broke it. And I've never felt lighter. Tell me, did I go too far, or not far enough?